Have you ever been using an app and you just get the feeling you're talking to a wall? Like it has absolutely no memory of what you told it 5 minutes ago? Well, today we're going to dive into a really practical recipe for building products that actually learn, that adapt, and most importantly, that remember. It all kicks off with this one kind of heartbreaking question. What am I doing wrong? This came from a user during a research session, and it's a question that just perfectly captures that deep frustration we feel when technology just doesn't get us. It's the real start of this whole story. So, picture this. There's a former professor. She's trying to find a new job, and she's using a job recommendation tool. But instead of seeing, relevant career moves, her screen is just flooded with openings for hostesses. We're talking Cheesecake Factory, Applebee's, over and over and over again.
So naturally, she does exactly what you or I would do. She hits dismiss, dismiss, dismiss. But they just keep coming back. So why? What was going on? Well, behind the scenes, the system was only set up to process feedback in these huge batches. So her input from right now, it wouldn't actually be learned by the system for another 2 to 4 days. By then, of course, she was long gone. Now, this terrible user experience, it actually led to this massive engineering project to build a real-time pipeline. And the result? It was one of the single biggest quality improvements the team had ever seen. A 20% drop in people dismissing jobs. That is a huge win, and it proved, without a doubt, that learning in the moment, it really, really mattered.
And this data, right here, it shows something absolutely critical. Just look at this. Almost all of the performance loss, all the damage to that user experience, it happens within the very first hour. After that, the decline basically flatlines. The takeaway is crystal clear. If you want to make a real difference, your system has to learn and adapt inside of a single session, not days later. Okay, so this whole story brings us to a really fundamental question. When we, as builders, talk about this fancy term continual learning, what problem are we actually trying to solve for the person on the other side of the screen?
And here's the massive difference in perspective. For a user, the request is so simple. Hey, just remember what I told you, right? Don't show me that hostess job again. Easy. But for a researcher, the definition is, well, it's a lot more complicated. Our job as product people is to somehow bridge that gap, to make the incredibly complex system feel incredibly simple and intuitive to the user.
So if the goal is for the system to remember everything, you might be thinking, well, the solution's obvious, right? Just give it a bigger brain, an infinite context window. But as it turns out, that whole idea, it's kind of a myth.
It's a really tempting idea, isn't it? I mean, if a model could just see every single interaction you've ever had with it, it should be able to learn perfectly. But the reality is, more memory doesn't automatically mean better understanding. In fact, sometimes it can create a whole new world of problems. Yeah, just stuffing more and more data into the context window can lead to some pretty major failures. You can get things like context poisoning, where a mistake from way back gets repeated forever, or context distraction, where the model just gets sidetracked by all the noise and forgets its original instructions. There's also confusion from irrelevant stuff and clashes when it gets conflicting information. It gets messy. Okay, so if an infinite context window isn't the magic bullet, then what is? Well, that brings us to a much more practical, 3-part recipe for building a system that can actually learn. So, the recipe has 3 essential ingredients. Number 1, you need a proper memory system. Number 2, a cognitive core that does all the thinking. And number 3, the glue that holds it all together and makes it smarter, a feedback loop. First up, the memory system. And let's be really clear here. This isn't just a big database where you dump all the data. You have to think of it more like a really well-organized library with its own Dewey Decimal System designed specifically so you can pull out the right information with the right context at exactly the right time. So what goes into a really robust memory system like this? Well, you need a few key things. The raw logs of every single interaction, for digging in later. You also need a memory graph to connect all the dots between different entities. And finally, you need synthesized, rich context for every piece of information so the system actually understands what it means. All right, ingredient number 2 is the cognitive core. This is the part the user actually talks to, the agent, the chatbot, whatever it is. But here's the key. This core can't just be passive. It has to be built with an awareness that the memory system exists, and it has to be actively trained to go and ask that system for the right information when it needs it. And now for the third, and you could argue the most critical part of the whole thing, the feedback loop. This is what stitches the memory and the core together into one cohesive system. It's constantly evaluating how well things are working and allows the system to get smarter and smarter. And let me tell you, it is by far the hardest part to get right.
This loop is always working in the background. It's running evaluations to find problems, it's automatically updating its own tests based on real user feedback, it runs regular optimizations to improve, and maybe most importantly, it provides the guardrails to stop the system from going completely off the rails.
So, we have our three ingredients: memory, a core, and a feedback loop. But just having the parts isn't enough. The real magic, and frankly, the real difficulty, is all in how you put them together.
And here it is. This is the absolute key hurdle you have to overcome. You cannot develop these three components in isolation. It just won't work. They are so deeply interconnected that they have to be designed, built, and optimized all together as one single system.
There's this fantastic quote from the source material that just nails the common mistake. It says, when you have separate teams optimizing each part on their own, what you're doing is shipping your org chart through your design. The product ends up reflecting your company's internal silos, not what the user actually needs.
And it just makes sense when you think about it, right? I mean, what good is a perfect memory system if the cognitive core has no idea how to ask it for the right information? And how can the core ask good questions if it doesn't have any baseline knowledge to begin with? And that feedback loop, it's pretty much useless if it's only looking at one piece instead of the whole integrated system. They have to work together.
Which leaves us with this final big idea to chew on. As we're all out here building the next generation of AI products, we have to ask ourselves a really crucial question. Are we building products that can truly remember, that can understand and adapt? Or are we just building products with bigger hard drives? Because the difference between those two, that's everything.